Hi, my name is Kaylin. I came back from a work trip to find my bed, my actual bed, thrown out by the trash bins like an old appliance no one wanted to admit they used. No message, no warning. Just the silence of people who had already replaced me. My family said I'd abandoned them, but they were the ones who locked the doors while I was still inside. And when I found out they'd erased me from everything, even the house I paid for, I packed a suitcase and walked into the villa they didn't know existed. But how do you unbelong from the people who raised you? How far do you go when your last name turns into a weapon? By the time I pulled into the driveway, the streetlights had already flickered on, casting long shadows against the sidewalk. My suitcase bumped clumsily over the cracked cement, one wheel catching the edge of a fallen leaf. I hadn't been gone long, just 10 days in Seattle for work, but something in the air felt off. Not quiet, just muted. Like the kind of silence that isn't peaceful, but suspicious. And then I saw it. My bed. The actual bed I slept in, mattress, headboard, and all, dumped beside the garbage bins like a piece of junk nobody had the heart to admit they wanted gone. The floral sheets my grandmother gave me, now torn and stuffed in a trash bag. The comforter I saved up for during my first job out of college, rolled up and stained from wet leaves. You can tell how someone feels about you by where they place the things you sleep on, I whispered. But the only thing listening was the October wind, rattling a loose shutter near the porch. I stood there longer than I should have, half hoping someone would come out and say, "It's a mistake," or "We were just cleaning." But the porch light stayed off. The door never opened. No voices, no footsteps, not even a dog bark, nothing. Eventually, I rang the doorbell. It was Bryn who answered, barefoot, holding a kombucha bottle like it was a wine glass, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Oh," she said, not even surprised to see me. "Didn't know you were coming back tonight?" Was that supposed to matter? I kept my voice steady. I could already feel heat gathering behind my ribs. She shrugged. "We needed space. You were gone anyway." I blinked, trying to process her tone. So casual, like we were discussing reorganizing a closet. "You couldn't call or text?" She leaned against the doorframe. "We figured you'd figure it out. You're the one with all the brains in the family, right?" Inside, nothing looked familiar. The furniture had been rearranged. My name wasn't on the Wi-Fi network anymore. And when I stepped into what used to be my room, I saw it wasn't mine at all. Candles lined the windowsill. A Himalayan salt lamp glowed pink beside a shelf of essential oils. A yoga mat stretched across the hardwood floor. My desk had been replaced by a singing bowl. I didn't speak. Not yet. Not there. Back in Seattle, before I left, I had installed a discreet motion camera under the eaves, angled toward the front porch. I never trusted how often Bryn looked at my deliveries or used my parking spot. That night, after throwing my bag into the trunk, I opened the camera app. It took only a few seconds to load the footage. There she was, Bryn, in full athletic gear, dragging my mattress toward the curb with Eden's help. They were laughing. Eden, only 7, asked, "Why are we throwing this out?" "She won't even notice," Bryn said. "She's always too busy being the career girl." I gripped the steering wheel. "Busy keeping this damn roof over your heads," I muttered, not out of anger, but out of clarity, because they really believed it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. No one needed to see that part. Instead, I grabbed my suitcase handle, wheeled it down the porch steps, one bump at a time. Every thud against the wood sounded like punctuation. I didn't look back. Sometimes the loudest response is silence, followed by action. I opened the car door, slid into the driver's seat, and stared at the house for a moment longer. Not because I wanted to go back, but because I wanted to remember this night, in case I ever doubted myself again. "Fools take kindness for weakness," I whispered, "until that kindness gets up and walks out." And I did. Portland at night is strangely serene. The further I drove, the more the streetlights began to feel like markers, checkpoints on my way to a new version of myself. The villa sat on the outskirts of town, tucked behind evergreens, and a wooden gate I had installed myself through a private contractor. It was mine, fully paid for. No one knew it existed. Not Bryn. Not Eden. Not even Maris. I parked, unlocked the gate, and rolled my suitcase up the stone path. As the front door clicked open, I was greeted by stillness, but the kind that healed. I flicked on the lights. Hardwood floors, cream walls, clean lines. The air smelled like eucalyptus and fresh paint. I didn't decorate much yet. It wasn't meant to be lived in, until now. I stood in the foyer, letting everything go quiet inside me. Then I exhaled, unzipped my coat, and whispered, "If home is where you're respected, this is the first time I've ever come home." I came back the next morning under the excuse of picking up a few things I'd left in the garage. No one asked me to return. No one opened the door before I rang. I parked at the curb instead of the driveway. There was something psychological about it, standing outside a house I used to call home, but now viewed like an old photo you keep for the background, not the people in it. The garage smelled the same, faint motor oil, cardboard, and something overly floral from an old box of potpourri. I knelt to lift a plastic bin marked seasonal, but my eyes drifted toward the door that once led to my bedroom. The one I'd repainted myself. I stepped forward, slowly, and nudged it open. My breath caught, not in a romantic movie way, but like I'd been winded without bracing for the blow. The space had transformed completely. Scented candles flickered on a floating shelf. A glowing Himalayan salt lamp sat in the corner. Yoga mats were stacked beside a rack of rolled towels. A decal on the wall read, "Breathe and release." My bed was gone. My desk, gone. The bookshelf I'd assembled alone at midnight 3 years ago, replaced by a minimalist altar with crystals I didn't recognize. And there, near the corner, half stuck under a cabinet, was the torn corner of my childhood diary, yellowed, dog-eared, and out of place in this curated tranquility. I didn't cry. Instead, I stared until the silence started pressing on my chest. I wasn't just replaced, I was erased. This wasn't about redecorating, it was about elimination. Later that evening, I was invited to Sunday dinner. That word had started to sting more than comfort. It used to be tradition. Now it felt like charity. Mary set the table, avoiding my gaze. I was placed at the far end, beside Eden's booster seat, with half an elbow's worth of space to move. Every time someone reached for the salt, I had to lean back like a visitor, overstaying their welcome. Bryn walked in late, laughing, waving her phone. "You know," she said, loud enough to draw attention, "technically, she's just visiting now, right?" The laughter that followed wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was casual. Vernon didn't say a word, just kept eating, eyes focused on his bowl. I looked around, letting the silence work for me. Then I said, clear and even, "It's wild how people feel brave in rooms built on someone else's paycheck." No one looked up, not even Eden. But I saw the twitch in Maris's hand, how she squeezed the serving spoon just a little tighter. That was enough. Later that night, while everyone was still sipping decaf and pretending we were bonded by more than blood, I wandered back into the hallway. The echo of a memory hit me hard. Years ago, standing in the same hall, handing Maris a check to cover the winter heating bill. She looked at it and said, "We don't need to make a show of things." No one ever talked about what I paid for. Not the groceries, not the water bill, not Eden's ballet shoes. They only ever talked about what Bryn brought, not what she borrowed. After dinner, Bryn announced she was holding a women's circle in what used to be my room. Guests filed in carrying mats and thermoses. Eden walked beside one of them, chatting about how Aunt Bryn's sacred studio was her favorite place in the house. I didn't join. I stood at the hallway's edge, invisible but aware. The laughter spilling from that room used to belong to sleepovers, late-night journaling, and silent grief. Now it was incense and mantras layered over memory. You know you're not welcome when your silence is the only thing they find comfortable. Before I left, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The lighting was soft, flattering, but the woman staring back looked like a watered-down version of who I remembered. I didn't rage. I didn't flinch. But I saw it clearly now. They weren't going to stop. But I would. I didn't know what I'd do next, but I knew staying invisible in my own life was no longer one of the options. The next time I returned to the garage, I told myself it was just to grab a box of old tax forms I'd left in a bin marked 2018-2020. But in truth, I was chasing the ghosts of things they hadn't thrown away yet. Proof, maybe, that I still existed in the house. Proof I wasn't crazy. The light above the garage flickered as I stepped inside. The smell hit first: dust, cardboard, and that odd stale scent of insulation baking under plywood. I pulled the bin forward, crouched to open it, and there it was. A pale pink envelope, my handwriting, still sealed. I blinked. Picked it up. On the front, in curling script, "Happy birthday, Mom." I had mailed it from across town 3 years ago, the year I worked 2 jobs and still took night calls from Eden's school when Bryn didn't answer. I'd poured every bit of sweetness I had left into that card, bought the nice one, not the discount pack, tucked a gift card inside, wrote a note I actually meant. And it had never been opened. It was wedged behind the power meter box like a rat trap. When people ignore your words long enough, you stop believing you're even speaking a language they understand. I put it back where I found it. I didn't need to keep it. I needed to remember it exactly where it had always been. Unread, unacknowledged, unnoticed. 2 days later, I got an email at work. I'd been selected for a National Data Ethics Award. Quiet category, no red carpets. But the committee included people I respected. People who'd built their lives around integrity. I texted the family group chat, short message. "Got an industry award this week, just wanted to share." Bryn sent back a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. No call, no congrats. Not even a, "What's the award for?" Later that night, I stopped by the house to drop off some last tax receipts Maris had asked for weeks ago. She opened the door, took them with a smile, and said, "That kind of award, it's just marketing, right?" I smiled. Right. In some families, even applause is a zero-sum game. There's only enough recognition for one person. And if that person's already chosen, the rest of you better learn to clap in silence. Driving back to the villa, I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I thought about how it had always been that way. When I won the regional science fair in high school, Maris had promised she'd be there. She forgot. Bryn had a dentist appointment, apparently. At 25, I bought my first car in cash. No one asked how I'd done it. But when Bryn's lease was denied due to credit issues, they all called me to co-sign. Turns out I wasn't invisible. I was just inconvenient. Sunday dinner came again. This time, Eden was chattier than usual, full of stories about her school project. She was drawing family helpers and told me proudly that she'd picked Aunt Bryn because she keeps us together. Then she said it. Not maliciously, just the honest way kids do. "Aunt Bryn says you work too much to have a real life." I didn't flinch. I looked at her, smiled gently, and took another sip of water. No one corrected her. No one clarified what I actually did. No one asked if it was true. I left before dessert. They want you present for their benefit, not for your being. Back at the villa, I poured a glass of wine. Not to unwind, but to mark something. I wasn't angry. I was archiving. I pulled out a blank leather journal I'd been saving for a someday. Tonight was it. Page by page, I wrote everything I had paid for. Rent, groceries, car insurance for a vehicle I didn't drive, Eden's recital dress, Maris's dental copay, Bryn's utilities, though she never admitted it. Every sacrifice made, every achievement ignored, every holiday forgotten. I didn't write it for revenge. I wrote it because someone had to. If you don't write your own history, someone else will rewrite it for you. And when someone rewrites your history, it's only a matter of time before they try to claim your future too. The package arrived on a Tuesday. No return address, Just my name, scribbled in a handwriting I hadn't seen on an envelope in years. Inside was the birthday gift I'd sent to Maris. Still wrapped, still pristine, not even a corner of the tape peeled back. The note taped to the front read, "You shouldn't have." No signature. I stared at the box, fingers brushing the ribbon. The paper was the expensive kind, thick with a slight shimmer, something I'd picked out months ago in a small boutique I knew she liked. I could see myself standing there in that store, debating between blue and lavender, thinking maybe this year it would be different. Maybe this time it would land. She didn't open it because she never planned to. It was never about what was inside. It was about showing me she didn't need anything from me, not even acknowledgement. This wasn't rejection. This was a reminder. Later that week, I found myself parked across the street from the house I used to help maintain. The sun was low, casting warm shadows across the lawn. Maris and Vernon were in the garden, hands deep in soil, talking like nothing in the world had shifted. They looked like a commercial for retirement, peaceful, settled, content. I had written out a message on my phone before I left the villa. I read it again. Just tell me what I did that made it so easy to erase me. I watched them for a while, their laughter drifting faintly through the cracked window. Then I hit delete. People don't just ignore you, they practice it. They master it. Sunday came. Another dinner I hadn't confirmed for, but was expected at anyway. I wore black. Not in mourning, just for contrast. When I arrived, Bryn was already at the table, holding court as usual. Her voice carried through the kitchen, through the dining room, like perfume you can't scrub off. Loud enough to be confident, empty enough to be harmless. I didn't interrupt. I didn't participate. I sat, folded my napkin slowly, and waited. Maris looked at me midway through the meal. "You've been quiet lately." I met her gaze, steady and unsmiling. Quiet people are usually deciding how much more they'll take. The room chilled like someone had opened a door. No one spoke after that. That night, back at the villa, I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank records. Years of deposits, transfers, family bills I'd covered without a whisper. I started building a financial timeline. Not to shame anyone, not to wave it in their faces. Just for clarity. Because if I didn't put it in writing, I knew they'd rewrite it without me. I highlighted the utilities from 2020. The tuition payment for Eden's summer camp. The grocery bills from the month Bryn had food allergies and couldn't shop. Every transaction came with a memory, a bite. On a blank sheet of paper, I wrote, "From this point forward, boundaries will be financial, not emotional." The next morning, I went to the post office. I placed the returned birthday gift inside a new box, along with a letter. Short, direct. To whom it concerns. Effective immediately, all financial support I have provided, direct or indirect, is discontinued. Any future attempt to request, expect, or imply financial involvement will be considered a violation of this boundary and handled accordingly. This is not anger. This is arithmetic. Sincerely, Kaylin, I didn't address it to Maris. I didn't address it to Bryn. I addressed it to the house, because that's all it was now. Wood, drywall, a Wi-Fi signal that no longer had my devices connected. I gave them more than money. I gave them permission. That ends now. But pulling out wasn't the end. They'd been drawing from me so long, they forgot what no felt like. Back at the villa, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the box I'd just packed. Inside, the unopened birthday gift, still wrapped, still pristine. I slid in the copy of the letter I had mailed, my boundary, cleanly stated and legally sound. Then I reached for the spare key, the one they never returned, the one I used to think meant I was trusted. I held it between both hands, gave it one hard twist. The snap was sharp and satisfying. It didn't splinter. It split. I slid the two halves into a small envelope, sealed it shut, and taped it to the top of the box. They handed me silence. I'm returning clarity. I scheduled the delivery for Friday morning, just before their neighborhood brunch, when the porch was most visible, when image mattered more than truth. Let it land in front of the neighbors. Let them open it with company around. If they had learned anything from me, it was presentation. They care more about how they look than what they've done, I muttered, typing in the address, setting the time. So I'll deliver the truth right on the doorstep. Later that night, I found myself scrolling through Bryn's social media feed. I'd muted her months ago, but something told me to look. And there it was. A photo of her, wrist cocked toward the camera. The caption, "When your work finally pays off, grateful to serve families and heal relationships." She was wearing a Rolex. Not just any Rolex. I knew the model. I knew the store. I knew the purchase date. Because it was the exact day she'd asked me to cover emergency groceries and charged $4,800 to the supplementary card I'd added her to back when Eden needed a pediatrician visit I wasn't supposed to know about. I pulled up my bank app, cross-checked the time, the vendor, the zip code, same transaction, same amount. They didn't just take from me. They wrapped it in lies and wore it like virtue. The fury didn't hit all at once. It spread slowly, like ink and water, curling into every part of me I used to protect with reason. I stared at the screen, then opened my phone and dialed the bank. I need to close every shared access, permanently. The rep confirmed. I changed every PIN, removed every name, added every layer of authentication. Then, I called my accountant. Pull every statement from the last 2 years. I want a full audit, every cent. This wasn't about paranoia. This was about pattern recognition. I didn't need them to get in trouble. I just needed a clean trail, for when they'd inevitably play the victim. That night, I lit one candle in the villa, sat at the kitchen table, and opened a new spreadsheet. Header. Expenses rendered, respect noted. I started at the top. Eden's school enrollment. Line by line, I typed in every dollar I'd spent on their comfort, their obligations, their lies. Medical bills I wasn't asked to cover but did. Car repairs Bryn claimed insurance wouldn't touch. A storage unit Maris used under my name because her credit had expired like milk on a summer day. Each entry gave me back a piece of myself. You can't make people value you, but you can make them feel your absence in the one place they counted on you most. The bank. I paused at the bottom of the spreadsheet. A final line blinked, waiting. Every debt has a due date. Consider this notice served, but I'd soon find out. When you cut people off, the ones who never saw you will suddenly feel blind. The first sign came as a quiet notification while I was slicing into an avocado. My phone buzzed once, just once. Unrecognized login attempt. I stared at it for a second before swiping. It was from my work account, flagged from an IP address that matched one I hadn't seen in months. Home. I pulled up the activity log. They'd been in there more than once. Months of silent taps, accesses timed just after dinner hours, just before midnight, always from the same Wi-Fi network, the one I used to pay for, the one now registered to Maris but named Brinstrong. I knew they couldn't look me in the eye, but apparently they looked everywhere else. I reset everything, changed my passwords, enabled biometric verification and forensic monitoring. And just in case, I put alerts on any outgoing correspondence, knowing full well they didn't just steal your piece. They stole your name, your language, your voice. A few days later, I got an email from HR at one of my oldest client accounts. "Thank you for the thoughtful holiday message," it began. The voucher was very generous. I hadn't sent anything, no message, no voucher. I called the contact, kept my tone even. "Just clarifying, who did you speak to about that message?" "Your assistant, I assume. She said she was you, actually. Sounded just like your voice. Warm, articulate. She even mentioned Eden." Bryn. Only Bryn would drop Eden's name in casual conversation like it was a credential. They didn't just want what I had. They wanted my face on it too. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I called Rowan. We'd gone to school together. He was quiet then, quieter now. A contracts attorney who didn't need headlines. I didn't explain much, just said, I need protection without noise. He sent me a draft the next morning. Cease and desist. Identity misuse. Digital impersonation. It was clean, sharp. I didn't send it. Not yet. I tucked it into my encrypted vault, alongside the digital access logs. Sometimes you don't light the match. You just show them the gasoline. The next family dinner was eerily calm. Maris had made her usual roast. Vernon was already seated with a newspaper he wasn't reading. Bryn arrived late, dressed like she'd come straight from a photo shoot. "You fixed your email thing?" she asked as she scooped potatoes onto her plate. "Yeah," I said. She smiled. "Must have been a glitch." I didn't smile back. Glitches always come with fingerprints. Silence. Maris shifted in her seat. Vernon looked down like he'd spotted something interesting in the gravy. Eden tapped her fork against her glass, watching us both like she'd learned more in this house than any school could teach her. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen island back at the villa and opened a blank folder labeled Insurance. Inside, I saved everything, every email log, every bank alert, every time-stamped digital interaction. 3 copies, 3 drives, all encrypted. Truth may be quiet, but it keeps better records than liars do. And if they thought silence meant surrender, they hadn't heard what silence sounds like when it hits back. It started with a document I wasn't even meant to find. I was combing through old tax folders stored on my cloud drive when I stumbled on the house refinance paperwork from 5 years ago, back when Vernon injured his back and couldn't work. I had stepped in, signed my name, guaranteed the loan so they wouldn't lose the home. And yet, when I checked the property records again, just for clarity, my name wasn't there. Not as a co-signer, not as a partial owner. Nothing. It had vanished like I never existed. I printed out the page, folded it twice, and drove to the house. Maris was clipping lavender out front. She looked up, waved like she hadn't just edited her daughter out of legal existence. I held out the page. "This is new," I said. She took it, scanned it lazily. "Oh, right. We had to simplify some things during the last update. You know how messy paperwork gets. Your name was just temporary." I didn't flinch. I just nodded and said, "I guess that's one way to frame erasure." Then I left. No yelling, no scene. Because erasure doesn't require noise. It only needs compliance. And I had stopped complying. Later that week, I took a walk through the old neighborhood. I wasn't looking for nostalgia. I was looking for distance. But as fate tends to do, it dropped me right beside a hedge behind which 2 women stood talking. Voices just loud enough to catch phrases between the rustling of leaves. "She moved out because she didn't want to help anymore." "That's what I heard. Bryn always carried the family, really." My hand clenched around the key in my pocket. I didn't step out. I didn't correct them. I let the bitterness fill the silence. Reputation isn't what you earn. It's what survives when you're not around to correct it. I walked back to the villa with the quiet of a soldier returning from a field that never recognized their sacrifice. Once inside, I opened my digital vault, uploaded new files, time-stamped financial records, family agreements from years past, copies of email receipts. I started a folder called Narratives versus Facts, and then I opened the family photo album. It had been digitized by Bryn last Christmas. The new version lived in a shared drive, which I still had access to. I clicked through. Eden's birthdays, holidays, Father's Day breakfasts, Maris and Vernon with smiles, Bryn always front and center. I was in none of them. Not even in the blurry corners. Not even by mistake. You don't need to die to be mourned. Some people write you out while you're still breathing. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a while. Then I drafted an email. Subject line: "For the record." Inside, a list of transactions, signatures, photos of receipts, financial milestones, everything I had contributed to the house, the family, the image they projected. I didn't send it. Instead, I saved it in a folder called Legacy Insurance. Some truths don't need to go viral. They just need to outlive the lies. But even silence has a boiling point, and mine was one broken record away from becoming sound. There's a certain kind of quiet that only comes after you've made a final decision. It's not peaceful, not exactly, but it's firm. That's how the villa felt that morning as I sat in the study, files open, pages spread like armor. The soft click of the paperclips was the only sound in the room. I didn't retreat here to heal, I came here to plan. Every folder had a label: bank transfers, property deeds, shared utilities, email logs. There was no anger left. What remained was precision, calculation, purpose. The silence was broken by a call from my bank's security team. "Miss Kalin, we flagged a login attempt from a restricted device on your savings account. Voice verification failed. Twice." I didn't need to ask who it was. The names on the internal flag report were clear. Maris. Bryn. They tried to use my name one last time, even when it wasn't theirs to speak. I gave the green light for a permanent lockout. No secondary verifications, no recovery contacts. Then I hung up and opened a new spreadsheet. Financial retaliation, Phase 1. Let's see how they manage now that the faucet's dry. The next day, I visited the notary office downtown, signed certified deed copies, and scheduled their delivery. One addressed to Maris, the other to Vernon. No notes, no explanations, just facts. The envelope included highlighted sections: my full ownership, date of final payment, and the removal of all others as parties of interest. Later that afternoon, I contacted the utility companies. One by one, I terminated every shared account still under my name. Electricity, gas, internet. Cell service for the backup line Maris used in emergencies. No warning, just gone. I didn't leave space for confusion. I left them what they gave me: silence. Bryn, of course, couldn't help herself. 3 days later, she posted a video from a grocery store, holding up bags of produce like she was a missionary. The caption read, "Because I take care of what matters." In the background, a receipt peeked from her wallet. I paused the video, zoomed in. Same timestamp, same card ending. But that card had been closed 2 weeks ago. I scrolled back to the internal bank logs. There it was, an attempted transaction marked "denied, fraudulent source." They say you don't catch liars in court. You catch them when they think no one's watching. I took a screenshot and filed it in the evidence folder. That evening, I printed one page. A letter. You said I left, but I didn't. You pushed. I just finally moved. Enclosed was a fresh copy of the deed. At the bottom, I added a single note. Effective immediately. You are no longer welcome in what I own, both physically and emotionally. No signature, no flourish. Just my initials, typed, and the date. I slid it into a neutral envelope. No return address. Just the new house logo on the corner. My logo. I sealed it, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the soft lamplight filling the room. They had built a fantasy on my silence. But fantasies crumble fast when you pull the foundation out from under them. Because people who rely on your silence will never accept your voice, and they were just about to get louder. I hadn't expected to wake up to anything significant that morning. It was a Wednesday, gray and slow, the kind of day that usually passed without comment. But my phone buzzed at 7:42 a.m., lighting up with a tag from an old classmate I barely remembered. The post was simple: a filtered photo of Bryn at a brunch table covered in mimosas and catered pastries, Marie smiling beside her, Eden hugging her waist. Caption: Love seeing tight families thrive. Bryn's been the glue. I stared at it longer than I should have. They weren't just rewriting history anymore. They were building a brand out of what they buried me under. I clicked through the rest of Bryn's feed. Post after post, polished and curated like a lifestyle influencer who had learned how to weaponize vulnerability. Holding space for healing. Family is where the work begins. We rebuilt together. Every image was drenched in faux authenticity. Carefully filtered shots of their new living room, the couch I bought, The dining table I refinished by hand one summer when Maris's back went out. Even Eden, wearing the scarf I gave her last Christmas, the one I'd knitted during a conference in Chicago. My name was nowhere, but my fingerprints were everywhere. That afternoon, I attended a community fundraiser, a small event at a local library I'd donated to for years. I wasn't planning to stay long, just show support, make a quiet exit. But as I stepped toward the children's activity area, I spotted Maris and Eden across the room. Eden glanced at me with curiosity, not recognition. Her brows furrowed. She tugged on Maris's sleeve. "Mommy says you used to live with us," she said loudly. "Were you a guest or something?" A nearby mother chuckled. Maris froze. I bent down to Eden's level. "Something like that," I said softly. Then I turned and walked away. Erasure is one thing, but when it passes to the next generation, it becomes extinction. I didn't go home angry. I went home resolved. I didn't post a rebuttal, didn't leave a comment. I didn't need to shout over a narrative that would eventually choke on its own lies. Instead, I sent one quiet email to the ethics committee of the organization that hosted the fundraiser. Attached, screenshots of Bryn's post claiming full credit for coordinating the event, receipts showing the venue booked under my LLC, my donation letter. Subject, correction for public record. That was it. No emotion, no accusation. Letting them fall on their own meant trusting gravity. The next few days passed like the hum of a distant storm. I heard about it first from Roan. Bryn had received an official inquiry about donation misrepresentation. Her name wasn't blacklisted, but flagged. For someone obsessed with image, that might have been worse. Maris tried to call. I let it ring. Vernon sent a text. "There's a better way to handle misunderstandings." I held the phone in my hand for a moment. Then I whispered to no one in particular. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft, of time, of credit, of face. I set the phone down, opened my laptop, closed the browser window, and for the first time, I noticed. My hand didn't tremble anymore. They thought the storm was over, but they hadn't yet met the silence that knows it doesn't need thunder to level a house. The email arrived just after sunrise. Subject line, "Formal complaint logged." The sender, a partner from the fundraiser committee. They had reviewed the submitted documents, the receipts under my LLC, and Bryn's public statements. The verdict was swift. Effective immediately, Bryn was removed from all public-facing campaigns and barred from future involvement. The language was civil, professional, but I could hear the undertone. You were caught. They built a castle on sand. I just waited for the tide. I didn't respond. I didn't gloat. I forwarded the email to my encrypted vault, tagged it, and closed the screen. By late afternoon, the doorbell rang. I knew before I looked who it was. Vernon. He stood on the porch like he didn't know how to position his hands. His eyes scanned the villa, probably realizing this wasn't a rental. This was permanence. "I wanted to talk," he began. I didn't move from my spot in the entry. "Talk." "Like adults," he said, then added quickly, "We're still family. We don't need to escalate this further." I tilted my head. I'm not interested in shared definitions of family that only apply when you're losing. He flinched, just slightly, then tried to chuckle. "No need to be sharp?" I didn't smile. I simply let him stand there until the silence pressed down on his shoulders. Then I closed the door. Later that evening, I compiled one last set of documents, certified copies of the deed, proof of final payments on shared obligations, and a formal statement of financial separation. I mailed them to Maris, with a notarized letter attached. This ends our fiscal relationship. Any future attempt to engage in financial actions under my name will be met legally. No anger, no threat, just documentation. You don't owe people closure. You owe yourself boundaries. The following week, the community center held its annual dinner, an event I helped fund for 5 years straight, even when I wasn't invited. This year, I had a seat at the table, not because I asked for it, but because I owned part of the building now, Quiet investments have a way of speaking louder than declarations. Bryn showed up late, dressed wrong for the occasion. Her heels too loud, her smile stretched too wide. People avoided her eyes, their conversations dipping just enough to signal something had changed. I didn't say a word to her. I nodded to the organizer, took my seat, marked founder, and let my presence do the talking. From across the room, Bryn stared at me, like a woman watching a storm rebuild the coastline. Back at the villa that night, I opened a blank document on my laptop. Not an email, not a manifesto, just a personal letter I'd never send. You asked me to live in the basement. You buried me in that house. I built a life over your heads. I closed the laptop, set it aside, and leaned back into the stillness that was now mine. One line echoed in my mind, soft but permanent. No one can evict you from something they never built. But even after walls are rebuilt, sometimes the wind still whispers what the house once let in. The envelope had no return address. But I knew the handwriting. It was Maris's. Slanted, slightly rushed. The kind of penmanship that used to leave notes taped to the fridge, reminding us not to slam the door. Inside, a single photograph. The house, now emptied. No curtains in the window, no cars in the drive. Just a line of tire tracks in the frost-covered grass and a notepaper clip to the back. "We're moving, thought you'd want closure." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Closure isn't a courtesy. It's a privilege earned by those who respected your presence. I let the envelope fall into the drawer with the rest of them. Birthdays missed, invitations ignored, all sealed in silent paper trails. Then I walked the length of the villa, barefoot on the cool tile, letting my fingers graze the edge of the hallway shelf I had built myself. A single vine of pothos curled down from a terracotta pot, reaching with no urgency. They may have stripped my name from their stories, but they never touched this chapter. This one I wrote alone. The walls had my paint. The floors had my choice of finish. Even the old radio tucked near the window played the kind of music I used to listen to in secret because it didn't match what the rest of them liked. An email pinged late in the afternoon. A reunion invite from an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. I stared at it, hovering between decline and accept, my mouse pointer flickering. I wasn't that girl anymore, the one who showed up hoping to be noticed, but I also wasn't afraid of being seen. I clicked, maybe. I don't fear showing up. I just don't need to be seen to be valid anymore. That evening, Bryn texted, "Can we talk? Just us." I started typing, then deleted the response. Instead, I called. It rang once. She picked up, breath caught between nerves and rehearsal. "I know things got twisted." "No need to rehash," I cut in. "I've accepted it. You should too." There was a pause. Then a half-hearted, "I didn't mean to hurt you." "It's not forgiveness I needed," I said. "It was distance." And I hung up. That night, I walked to the small bookstore downtown. The owner knew me by name now. I spent a few hours organizing shelves and chatting with a few familiar readers. A little girl with a pink bow tapped me on the arm as I was alphabetizing the poetry section. "Do families always stick together?" she asked. I knelt beside her, glanced at the copy of The Velveteen Rabbit in her hand. "Not always," I said softly, "but the good ones don't make you beg to belong." She smiled. Kids always understood more than adults gave them credit for. I stayed until closing, helping lock the front door, then stood outside for a moment, watching the rain paint slow silver lines across the pavement. There was nothing left to mourn, and I didn't feel proud. I felt steady. But even healing needs room to echo, and mine was about to sing in places I never thought I'd hear peace. The tip came in a brief email from Roan. "Auction scheduled. House is listed." Just like that. No ceremony, no apology. I didn't need to click the link. I knew which house he meant. Still, I found myself sitting in the back row that morning, behind two women whispering about interest rates and foreclosures. The auctioneer's voice bounced off the walls of the county hall, monotone but final. At the front, I saw them, Maris and Bryn, arguing in hushed tones with a stiff-faced real estate agent. Maris kept adjusting her scarf. Bryn's mouth moved like it was rehearsing a defense that would never be heard. I didn't bid. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't blink. They lost the house the moment they thought I didn't matter. Halfway through the session, the listing agent cleared his throat. We'd like to acknowledge the original financial underwriter who made this property possible, Miss Kalin. Heads turned. Maris went pale. Bryn's face froze like she'd swallowed a camera flash. I stood, just long enough to be undeniable. I was always part of the house, I said. You just tried to build over me. And then I left, before anyone could form a reply. 3 days later, I returned to the property one final time. The keys were still under the stone frog by the front step, one habit they never broke. The house was empty, echoes clinging to walls like dust no one bothered to sweep. I walked the length of the hall barefoot, my steps soft against the wood I'd paid for. The baseboards still had the patch I'd sanded. The window in the kitchen still stuck halfway open, just like it had when I tried to fix it with cheap weather stripping and my own patience. I didn't cry. I took out a small envelope and laid it on the counter. Inside, a photocopy of the original deed. My name circled. A sticky note attached. History doesn't forget everything, especially when it's in writing. Then I turned off the lights, locked the door behind me, and didn't look back. 2 weeks later, I gave a talk at a local TEDx event, one of those favor invites from a past client who'd watched everything unfold. The stage lights were warm. The room was packed. I stood still and told the story, not the details, but the truths. About boundaries, silence, loyalty that isn't reciprocal. I titled it, When Silence is Louder Than Loyalty. The clip went viral. Comments poured in. I've lived this. You gave us the words we never had. I didn't cry during the speech. But when I spoke the last line, I felt something settle inside me, like clean breath. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who doesn't throw your bed on the lawn. A month later, I moved again. This time, not out of necessity or escape, but direction. A small coastal town. A house with 3 windows that faced the ocean and one mailbox with my name printed on it. Just one name. On moving day, a neighbor with a German shepherd leaned over the fence. Starting fresh? He asked. I smiled. No. Just continuing where I should have started the first time. The sun hit the brass letters just right. Kalin. No last name. Just mine. There is no next chapter, just the rest of my life, finally written in my own handwriting,